Cool. All right. I want to hear what's new.
So what's new? Let's see. Let me look at my notes here. So the issue with remote controlled recording was resolved.
That's the big one, right? Yeah.
That's yeah. Well, recording was never broken
Right.
itself.
Wasn't auto starting, right?
Yeah, so it wasn't really working properly with some of the changes that I introduced. The reason I was asking you earlier if you could see the record button is because there's a new setting now at the podcast level where the host has full control of recording for everyone in the session.
Okay.
So
Nice.
if you turn that feature on, then only the host has the record button. When the host clicks record, then everyone starts recording automatically locally.
So yeah, effectively you can by being the controller of the podcast, of the recording, you're like, okay, we're going to start recording now. Hit it, and that's it, and nobody has to do anything. That's nice. That's cool.
Yeah, no one has
That's
to
probably
do.
better than the auto recording idea, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
rather than it being like dropping everybody into auto recording, it's actually just controlled, and you can effectively introduce it and make sure everybody's happy, and then kick it off, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the option to auto start recording is still there, just in case someone wants that. So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
still there, but it's, you can turn it on, you turn it off if you don't like it at the podcast level. What happened was when I introduced that new feature with the remote controlled recording, all of a sudden the actual remote controlled recording wasn't working. It seemed like the message wasn't getting across, to the other
Right.
browsers,
Just
to the
wasn't
other
getting the
sessions.
message to start recording, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so the weird thing was that it was working on my development environment and it was working on the staging environment.
And it
Happened
was
was,
working on that. So you set it up and staging was just working, and you're like, what the hell?
yeah. So, but wasn't working in production, which is when I inadvertently broke remote recording in effect because it was working locally. It was fine. So I didn't know I was pushing something that was not going to work in production. So I didn't have a staging environment at the time. So this kind of forced me to set up a staging environment that's, identically replicates the production environment. And I pushed it to staging and it worked there as well. And and I was like, man, what the heck's going on? So, long story short, I did a lot of debugging and logging and troubleshooting, and it took forever, but finally narrowed it down to something in the build. So the fact that it was working in my local environment and staging and not in production, it kind of pointed to the build process because the only difference between those three environments was that the code for production gets minified and mangled.
Right.
JavaScript
Yeah, of
gets
course.
mangled. So
Yeah.
something in that build process for production was affecting my code somehow.
But
So
most of it was working. Like the rest of the interface was working. It was just
yeah,
that part, right?
it was just
That's even
that
worse.
one
It's like
one
if
feature.
your
Yeah.
UI doesn't work at all, you're like, all right, we've got a JavaScript problem, right? But just that little bit, right?
Yeah, yeah. So after a lot of debugging, I finally found the part of the code that was causing the problem. So interestingly enough, I had a method that was it was attempting to determine the name of the class of a JavaScript object. And in doing that, it was relying on a statement that does object.constructor.name, basically. So
Right.
it pulls the name of the constructor, which is theoretically the name of the class, and it works
And that's getting minified,
and it gets mangled. So
obfuscated, right? Yeah. That's what I mean.
obfuscated. Yeah, it
Yeah.
gets obfuscated. And so it changes the name arbitrarily. Every time it
Yep.
builds for production, it was mangling that. And so it was changing to like a single letter, T
Yeah.
or F
Right.
or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. Of course.
Every time. So the lesson here is not to rely on constructor.name. And subsequently, I found all these warnings people have posted on Stack Overflow. Don't do this because it'll change it arbitrarily when your code gets obfuscated. A little too late for me after spending so much time, but that was the reason
You won't make that
why.
mistake again, though. That's for sure.
Oh
You've
yeah, for
learned it the hard
sure.
way.
For sure. And yeah. But it made sense after the fact why it wasn't working in production and it was working everywhere else because
Yep.
it was only for production that it was getting obfuscated, therefore changing the name.
It wouldn't even cause like a JavaScript error because it's still valid JavaScript. It's just the wrong method or the wrong object it's trying to call, right? So That's even
exactly.
worse.
And then
It's not just like invalid anymore. It's just not there. So it's like, oh, okay.
it's just not there. There's no error. And that's why I never got any error, because the real problem was I had a conditional statement that said, if this object equals this class name, right,
Yeah.
then do this. And so
Yeah.
it was never that class name because it was
No.
obfuscated.
That's the worst. It's just getting silently eaten because it's not an error. It's just not
there's
there.
not an error. Yeah. When I finally fixed it, it felt great. So that was
Yeah, I can
that.
imagine.
And
Yeah,
that
like
was a
massive
big one.
relief.
Yeah. So now this feature works really well now. The host can control everyone's recording status. Everyone gets a message though, so when the host initiates recording, everyone gets a little message that pops up and lets them know what's going
Gotcha.
on. Let's see. Then the
That's
next
really
thing
nice.
that I
I like
worked
that.
yeah.
That's
Let's see. The other thing I did was schedule sessions now show info if the link is accessed early. And I think that was your suggestion a while back. You suggested, well, if the session is scheduled and they follow the link, there was nothing telling them anything about the session. It was just, acting normally, showing you the button to join and, enter your name and join. So now a scheduled session, when they access it early, it basically says this session is scheduled for such and such date and time. And then it has a little explanation there that says it'll happen automatically. So no need to refresh the page.
Nice.
And
so because
so,
that the URL is like obfuscated anyway using hashes, so it's not like that anyone will stumble across it. So yeah, nice, cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So thank you for that suggestion. By the way,
that was my idea. So it's a great idea then.
Yeah, it was a great idea. Yeah. So that's in now. You probably didn't see it this time because the scheduled time was like a minute later or something.
Yeah. Right. So does that kick in like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or some period before or at the scheduled time?
Yes. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So let's say schedule is scheduled for 3:00 p.m. or 1500. Then it will enable the ability to request to join 5 minutes before. So at 2:55 or what is that? 1455.
Yeah, don't start with that. Yeah, I've been having time zone funds myself, so I also have to think. So, I mean, I'm so used to, I guess, 2400 clock. I mean, Japan uses solely like 24-hour clock. Or even weirdly, Japan uses 30-hour clock in most cases for like retail, and for times that you see a time, they use the 30-hour clock, which is an interesting one. Basically, it ends at 6 a.m. the next day, which means that if like a bar is open or a shop or something, if it closes at 1 a.m., it closes at 2500. And so by default, that ends at 6 a.m. So that will then roll over, because you don't close at 7 o'clock in the morning. If you're going to close overnight, it'll be like 3, 4, o'clock or whatever. So for train times, for shops, for bars, restaurants, that kind of thing, they always use 30-hour clock, which is it's weird the first time you see it, like that's wrong, that's ridiculous, it should just say 1. And then once you get used to it, you're like, that's such a good idea. It's so clear when something says it's open from 2000 till 24, 26, 27, you're like, all right, yeah, that makes sense.
It's like the next day. You get used to the idea that it's the next day.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And it's one of those that the first reaction is just like you're like, no, wrong, that's just incorrect. But yeah, when you get used to it, you prefer it. It's just
That's cool. I didn't know that. I never heard of that.
So so I'm dealing with clients that are in the US, and my default, of course, is to use 2400 24-hour clocks because it's unambiguous, it's clear, it's what I'm used to. And they're all like, we can't think like that. Can you just put an AM on that? They're like, it's maths every time I have to put in a time. Can you please change it? And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I guess.
Yeah.
So something I discovered this way, I didn't even know it existed because I use Safari primarily as my browser, and apparently there's an input type equals time, which works on pretty much everything apart from Safari, which will give you a time picker, just like a scrolling of. And that is apparently based on the setting of your Mac as to whether, or your machine, PC, as to whether it's set to 2400 hours or 12-hour clock, and it'll give you an AM, PM. And I didn't even know that input existed, but finding out that it isn't supported in Safari might as well not exist anyway. So like one of those, yay!
Nice.
So, Anyway,
Nice. Yeah.
sorry, it's a
So
little sideline there.
no worries. No worries at
Actually,
all.
that's a good question. When you schedule in your when you schedule a
Session.
podcast, a recording, a session,
Mhm.
yeah. What do you use for a time picker there? Do you just have are you using like flat picker or
I'm
I can't actually remember.
Yeah, I'm using, what is it called? Let me look here. I'm using a popular library for that I found online. So I created a Vue component, a custom Vue component, but on top of a open source
Gotcha.
library that
Okay.
I found
Right.
online. It's called vCalendar,
Okay. Right.
vcalendar.io. So if you need to check
I'll
it
check
out,
that out.
go to vcalendar.io. I can put the link here.
Cool. No, because I ended up I need the same thing as well, and I originally just had so that just taking a look. So it has a time picker in it as well, right? Or is it just a calendar pick? Oh, it does have like
Yeah.
a little time pick. Oh, that's quite
Yeah,
nice. All right,
it's pretty robust and it's very flexible. It has a lot of
nice,
options that you can play with.
cool,
It can deal with date ranges and things like that,
nice.
markers, all kinds of stuff. It's pretty extensive. So I
That's
really
nice.
liked it
Yeah,
because it provides a lot and it seems to be popular and well supported and
good.
pretty
That's
well
good. I like
developed. The
that. So
documentation
yeah,
is really good. So
that's always nice. It's
I I,
not
o- I
doesn't
usually
rely. Does it rely on Vue, or is it's actually
no.
agnostic?
No, I think it's framework agnostic, or maybe
Okay,
it supports different ones.
cool.
Let's
Okay,
see, View
I'll
3.
investigate.
Yeah, take a look. I think, does it? Let me see. Introduction. It's been a while since I set it up.
Yeah, JS. It says that right in the title. So yeah, it uses Vue. Okay, but I might have a look at that, see how it works. So I'm not using
Oh, it
Vue,
does.
but definitely it might be good for an influence. So it's shocking how not. So the default, at least one of the
Yeah.
most popular, seems to be flat picker, which seems to do a lot of things, but it doesn't seem very elegant in any of them. And so I'm using that as just a like, oh well, it's working until I have a chance to go back and improve it. But yeah, just
Mhm.
a good solid time picker that doesn't rely on any framework doesn't seem to be as available as as I would have liked it. I would have kind of
Yeah.
expected to be like, oh, here's 10 great examples, and it's like, no, there's one, and it's not that great. And it's like, oh, okay. So I think I just need to go back and do it properly. So yeah, it's surprising how it's such a common thing, and there isn't like, at least not that I found, that there was a default. Yeah, everybody uses this is the one, and like a lot of libraries
Yeah.
you tend to find that way. So
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
investigate. It's just me being lazy and not wanting to write my own. Because out of
Well,
all the things I could be spending my time on, writing a time picker is not one of them.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a lot of work to create
There's
a
a lot
time
of
picker or a date picker.
the date picker.
All
Yeah,
the
exactly.
all the nuances with the dates and time zones and all that. It's crazy.
Yes. So I had this
So,
fun one. So I have a reminder thing in in Dotplan, so you can say, oh, 5:30 every day, send me a reminder. And I inadvertently screwed that up. So I'm using AWS SES for sending
uh-huh.
the emails, and that's fine. That just there's a bit of a validation thing you have to go through. Have to jump through some hoops to get AWS to, one, turn it on, and then two, allow you to send emails to non-test addresses, because you got to say why you're going to do it and what it's for and all the rest. So once you've said all that of it, it's fine. And I don't know why. I'm assuming it was my logic rather than their logic, but one of the mails got delayed, and it was only by a few minutes. And I'm assuming it was my scheduler didn't kick off at the right time or something, which I don't understand why, but I have to
Mm.
go and have a look
Mhm.
at sometime. And
Yeah.
that caused kind of a knock-on effect for my logic for when to send a reminder. It wouldn't send you a reminder if there'd one been sent within the last 24 hours of the same reminder type. So you could actually set one for 5 p.m. and one for 6 p.m. as it is right now, and it would send you one at 5 p.m. and the 6 p.m. one wouldn't send, because it was like, well, I've already sent you one within the last 24 hours. Oh, no, sorry.
Mhm.
It would, because they're separate reminders. But by
Oh,
one of
right.
them being delayed, that reminder then kept being delayed even further, because it's like, oh, I've already sent you one within the last 24 hours. I'll send you one a little bit later. I had this thing where each day they were getting like 5 minutes later. And I'm like, okay.
Huh. Yeah.
And it got to the end of the week and I'm like, okay, I really need to fix this now. It's like, half an hour out of 6. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate times with a passion.
Yeah.
Time
Yeah.
zone.
It's always a pain dealing with that.
And at the end of the day, it was a time zone thing. It was just me trying to shift things around time zones. And by doing that, the calculation was incorrect. And it was going, so yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Anyway.
man.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all. No worries. Let's see. A couple more things to report here. I scheduled a hangout on one of my communities.
I saw. Yes.
Yeah.
How did that go? How many turned up? Did anybody turn up?
It didn't go very well. So I think I made a mistake of scheduling it for a Friday and not giving people enough notice. I thought maybe Friday was going to be a good day because it's the end of the week and people would hang out. But I think what happened was that people were not very active in the community at that time, and not many people found out about it. And also, there's time zone issues, with people.
I didn't actually see your message until after it had happened. So yeah, that's kind of an example of that, especially since I don't check as frequently. I'll see that, when I've got some downtime and I'll go and have a look, see if there's any messages. And it's not, whereas, work is kind of like on and open and notifications, whereas other channels are like, it's not so important.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe scheduling it a couple of days, like on Friday, I'll do this. Maybe.
Yeah, ahead of time. So only one person showed up, and
you made a new friend.
she showed up because I had mentioned to her that I was planning to do that, and at some point, and she asked me to let her know, and so I dropped a quick message directly to her. It's this Friday, and so hopefully you can make it. And she showed up, and she was the only one. So.
Never mind. Next time.
So I'm thinking to schedule another one for one of these days, but I'll give people more time, more in advance.
On the subject of like communities and things, so I think I mentioned to you over DM. So I joined a Founders Circle, and so it was I think like a paid community, but the guys made it free. Basically, just message him and tell him why you want to be in, and he'll let you in. And so he's covering basically all the it's using Circle app as like a community board thing, and it's really nice. I think because it's smaller and he's trying to establish it, he's been very proactive in trying to grow the community and trying to get other people to be active too. So it feels a little bit more like he's, I think whereas Mega Maker is quite established now, it for the most part, just in kind of like, we'll poke it occasionally, but it's not like his full-time, like, okay, I've got to get everybody to do things. Whereas this feels still a little bit more like it's trying to get established. So it's nice, and everybody's seems very helpful. And there's some really interesting people on there. I didn't realize I mentioned copy.ai a few weeks ago, which is like the AI copy rewriting thing. So he's actually on there as well. And there's some other interesting folks doing some interesting stuff. So nice. But they also mentioned they do like a weekly check-in kind of idea in one of the channels. And there is no chat either. It's all just by posts, so it feels a little more asynchronous than something like Mega Maker's, which seems to have gone more towards the Slack than the board right now. And so he mentioned that they've been testing podcast recording tools with the co-founder of the board to find one to record a podcast with. And I'm like, oh, come on, Mario. So you could be the tool of choice there, because they seem very supportive in their own products. So I would recommend calling in and introducing what you're doing, because I think they'd be very willing to give it a go and give some good feedback. So it's interesting. So the founder of it did a Loom walkthrough of .plan for me as like a freebie, like I'd like to help out. And there's another guy that is a UX designer from London he said he's going to do it too. I noticed that I don't know if he's created an account, but somebody created an account like yesterday, and I'm like, okay, I wasn't expecting anybody else to create an account, so I assume it's him. I haven't. So he said he's going to do similar kind of thing, just a walkthrough. So they're actually starting to share those. There's a directory of them. So effectively, to help each other out, they will do walkthroughs of each other's product, like the onboarding, like, oh, what does this mean? Like, talk out loud through the thought process of the product, and that's been really helpful. So one so far, and somebody else is doing it, and because of that, other people are watching it and then saying, "Oh, that looks really cool. I'll like to give it a try. Is it okay if I sign up?" Yeah, please sign up.
Yeah.
So hopefully, it's a nice little way of getting people to know about it and to see it as well, because people are interested in learning from other people's UX examples anyway. So that actually,
Yeah.
I guess you're kind of finished, right? Just to check.
Almost, yeah, almost. Yeah, no worries. No, and
I don't want to start rambling on about my things first.
No, and on that note, I did get your invite link the other day for that community, and I did join already, but I haven't had a chance to introduce myself or
Cool.
or do much in there. I still need to explore and introduce myself. So I should be doing that pretty
Definitely.
soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It looks like a really cool community though. It's funny you were mentioning that it's just getting started, but it looks like there's quite a bit of participation going on. And
right. So I think what happened
like...
is, so Gene, the founder, I'm kind of reading between the lines. So it looks like, so he's based surprisingly very close to me. He's on the same island, but in the south. And it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's weird. Like, so it is a really small world, right? Sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I think, so he's selling an info product. And so people who were buying it, he was inviting them to it. And so I think it's been slowly, he's been building it out, and now he's getting more people involved. So it's kind of interesting.
Nice.
Yeah, so it seems like quite a nice community. So definitely, I'd recommend introducing yourself. And
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I'll be doing that pretty soon, because one of the things that I want to share too, which kind of this is a good segue to it, is that I decided to freeze any new features at this point, just for now. And I think
I need somebody to tell me to do that.
You can do it, Alan. You can do it. Freeze it right now. No, I think FusionCast is at a point where it's good enough that it can be used. I have someone who's been using it already, and I think it's at that point where, yeah, it still needs more features. It still needs quite a bit of work to be polished here and there, but for the most part, it's usable.
I absolutely 100% agree with you there. This is, I mean, there's lots of things that you want to do, but there's absolutely nothing that it can't do right now that you'd need to make a podcast for somebody, right? And it looks great. And there's, walking through the admin interface and as a guest as well, both. I think having that remote control, I mean, it sounds like a small thing, but that I think that's like the final, not must have, but really nice to have, that then anybody can, there's no excuse. Absolutely. You've got zero excuses now.
So you're right. So I decided to freeze new features and focus on marketing for a while. I need to update my marketing site. The landing page is good and all right now, but it was like the first attempt at putting something out there, and I need to update it with more relevant information and something that reflects what the product is becoming now. The copy that I have on the marketing side is kind of a reflection of the early ideas and the early stage of the product, and now it's it's becoming more defined, so I need to update that.
I would highly recommend playing with copy.ai when you're doing that, just because it's really
cool. Yeah, I'll try to do that. Yeah, and I need to send some email updates to the people that I've onboarded with the latest changes put into the product, and also do more onboarding. I need to invite some people.
Did you say you because you've got Outsetter already set up, right? So but you don't have any restrictions with the billing plans, right? Is that what you
Right. I have an account with them, and I'm using some of their features, but I haven't integrated any part of the billing yet. So the billing is not, I don't have anything set up for that yet. So I think at this point, I'm still in private beta, and I'm going to be onboarding some people. I think I can still get away without the billing integration.
Yeah. I think you can for at least another month or so, until you kind of reach the point where you want people to pay, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to be focusing on that for the next few weeks, just marketing, emails. I want to establish some kind of strategy for social media, mainly Twitter. That's the only social media that I'm
I think that's a
that I
good
care
point.
about. Really.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
absolutely the right decision where you are. I mean, there's one of the nice things that you have that is maybe, I guess different to my product is somebody either wants to make a podcast or knows they should, or they don't, and people know what a podcast is, and what you have to do is convince them that your product is worth trying, not that they need your product, right?
Right.
I mean, I guess there's advantages. You can talk about the benefits of podcasting, but it's not like this is wow, podcasting, never heard of that, right?
Yeah.
The hard part of that is already done for you. You just now need to convince them that your product is worth their time and attention.
Yeah.
Or at
That's a
least,
good point.
worth evaluating. So
Yeah.
with .plan, I guess I have this thing where some people aren't sure if they even need it or even what it's for. So I have to convince them a little. Some people, absolutely get it immediately. Most maker type people already get it, or a lot of software people will get it if you frame it in the context of a stand-up. So if you say, well, it's like your stand-up but just less formalized, and they go, oh, right, okay, I've got it. Whereas people who aren't working in software are like, huh, I've got to do what?
Yeah.
So it's slightly more of an alien concept, and I'm trying to avoid using the word stand-up because I don't want to target software developers. That's not I'm very happy for them to use it, and it hopefully works well for that, but that isn't my primary target. So I'm trying to avoid using the term stand-up for that reason, and that's actually affected a few things. So watching people walk through it, so I've got 2 recordings of people walking through it now that have given me some very useful ideas, or at least realizations of things that I could improve or maybe change with regards to wording and copy on the page. So the first one is I use the word organization quite a lot, as in, so right now, if you create an account, you join an organization, and that is starting to feel off with everybody who I'm using it with. People don't necessarily, it feels like for business type B2B SaaS apps, workspace is becoming the go-to word for that. And I think people are there's
workspace?
less
Did you say
workspace? Yes, yeah. There seems to be less. It's a less loaded term, whereas the word organization is very loaded. People immediately think, "Oh, well, I'm in a big company. I've got to, I work for Toyota. If I create this, have I got to create a Toyota account?" It's like, no.
Yeah.
So it could just be your group. This is fine. So the word organization has got to go. 2 things I'm happy about that, because it always felt a little bit slightly out of place, but it felt necessary to have. I mean, we need that grouping, but the word I was never completely convinced by it. And the other thing as well is I spell it with an S and Americans spell it with a Z, and and it's both ways in my code. Some of the things I've not been very consistent with my code. I use S throughout my code, and then I'm trying to change it to use Z in the UI, and then I forget and I put S, and then I do a search and replace, and it's like, oh god, this is just
Oh man,
I'm going to use workspace. So I'm going to bite the bullet and change everything to workspace, and I think that will, watching people go through it is like, oh yeah, that's almost feels like a barrier to people. They hit that like create or join an organization, they're like, oh, but I can't do that, and you're like, why not? So that was a big I need to change that. So I'm actually happy about that.
Yeah, that's awesome though. I wouldn't have thought of that, but now that you're explaining it, it totally makes sense. The term organization, it just sounds too enterprisey, too, huge corporation or huge organization. And workspace is so much more friendly. Like, oh, workspace, it's just my workspace. It doesn't imply a huge enterprise entity.
Right, exactly. I mean, it might just be, you and, we could effectively create a Fusion Cast workspace, right?
Yep.
And that was still valid. We're not an organization, but we could have a workspace and we could share check-ins there. And so I've been quite careful about, obviously the privacy aspect for companies is kind of major with this, right? They're putting data in this and also a personal profile of who I am within that business that cannot be leaky in any way. But at the same time, people do exist in multiple workspaces. So whereas organizations, again, it has this loaded term that if you're in one, then you can't be in another, right?
Yeah.
So workspaces does feel like there is a possibility of switching between workspaces that I've got to be very careful about that, I think, because you want to make sure that people are aware of where they are and there's good landmarking to, like, I'm currently in this workspace. You have to be very clear about, who you're publishing to and what context you're in. But at least it feels possible, whereas workspace felt in my mind not a feasible thing to add from a UI perspective. It's kind of just cleared things up in my mind. Once I've realized that, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that makes things better. So, and along very similar lines, I have teams as a top front and center concept within Plan. So I think, I don't know if you remember, but you've got like check-ins and teams and people. So
yep.
I can see people within my organization and teams. So my concept around this was teams are a loosely defined group that you want to keep in touch with. That might be, if we're working on in a workspace and we're working on making a new landing page, or it's our job, there's a designer, there's a developer, and there's someone from sales, and so we our project is to improve our landing page. That was kind of my idea of a team, but people aren't reading it as that. People are reading it as sales or development or marketing or front end or back end. And I think this is maybe a problem of me not working in a large company for a very, very, very long time. But my idea of what a team is apparently is out of whack with what other people's idea of a team is. So I'm actually going to demote teams. I'm going to keep it there but move it within the people page category. So you can still, area. Right. And I'm going to add the concept of projects as a top level thing, which is basically we work in the same way of teams, but I'm going to call it projects. And also that's
I see.
So this way, I'm going to add some, copy to make it clear of what it is. But the idea is that projects can then come and go. Like we might be on a project together for the next month, and then we effectively archive that project. Our check-ins for that project are still kept together. They're visible and viewable as a collection. But that project can effectively be archived, and we've got it there for if we need to go back and look at it, but it's not an active thing. So I think making projects more of a front and center feature rather than trying to do it ad hoc via Teams and me not communicating that very well, it made it very clear when people started to try and use it. I was like, people aren't that we're not on the same wavelength here. So I've tried the wording and talked through this with people who did that, and they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. So
nice.
I think it's not a major change on my end, but I think it's slightly more work than the workspace change. But I think it kind of gets across my intention better than the teams, which my idea is to kind of make it, I guess, human hackable, right? That's my intention, is to not like force people down a particular way of using it. But what I'm finding is that people are, rather than doing that, people are reading into something and then making assumptions about how it should be used. I guess I think I've talked about this before. I like this idea of giving people some tool sets and then going, figure out, make this work for you. What I'm realizing is people aren't doing that. People are making an assumption about what I want them to do and then assuming that that's what they have to do, and that's it. So I think I'm going to have to lead people by the hand a little bit more than I was doing. So rather than having this ad hoc teams that you can use it in whatever way suits you, then no, I'm going to say, you've got projects. You know what a project is, make a project. And then archive the project, you finished it, close the project and archive it. Okay, I get that. It opens, it closes, it's done. I think I was being a little bit too hippie there, thinking that giving people that just, here's your tools, you should figure it out. Yeah, maybe that's what I should be doing.
Yeah, I think you're on the right path here with changing your thinking about this because like you were saying earlier, the product, it requires a little bit of education, right? A little bit of positioning and education. And I think making these changes will you're making the product more assertive as to
Yes,
what it is that it does. And this is how you do it. And this is it, instead of
that's
leaving it
exactly
up
it.
to the
Yeah,
user to use it
it's more assertive. Yeah, and that's not
yeah.
tends to be my nature, but I'm realizing that I kind of have to be a little bit more if I want people to understand how to get the most out of it, right?
Yeah. I think that's the right call. Yeah, for sure. I was going to ask you, since we're talking about the UI and stuff, when you do a check-in, is there any way to edit what you wrote? Because I don't think
You
I
don't
was able
see
to
it
find a way
because
to
I removed that
change.
feature at the last minute because I wanted to change. I wasn't happy with how it's working. So yeah, the delete or unpublish.
Okay.
So yeah, what it was right now was an edit. So you could just go in and change things. Um, I wanted to change it to be an unpublish. So if I did something wrong, unpublish this, move it back into your plan page, fix it, and then republish. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking I might just temporarily actually just until I've got that working, because there's a few complications with that, just the way it manages how plans get moved around and checked off and checked in. So I think in the meantime, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to have an edit or delete just as a short-term tool, but until I can get the unpublished finished. Yeah. You're the first person that sprung it up, actually. That's kind
I
of
see.
interesting.
Okay.
It Yeah, but it's one of those things where I know it
Yeah,
wasn't
because
working, and I'm like, has anybody noticed yet? No one's noticed yet. So I'm glad you
yeah,
noticed.
the other day I posted something and I wanted to change it. I wanted to edit it and I couldn't find a way. And I was like, I'm going to ask Alan.
Yes. So yeah, I've held off on inviting any more people because I kind of want to implement these and then get the right kind of feedback right. So I get the feeling now if I
Yeah.
introduce anybody else, I wanted to get some more people invited last weekend or before last, like sometime last week. And then when I kind of made these realizations, I'm like, all right, do I have to get people on board and then tell them how it's going to change? And I'm like, that's not cool, right? So I'd rather get at least some of
Yeah.
this changes made and then be like, okay, now I've got some more valid, better feedback because it's based on the better version, right? So yeah, those changes
Yeah.
are currently being done. So hopefully, I'm going to try and get them finished this weekend, and then hopefully next week I can introduce some more, invite some more people on board. So it's
Nice.
yeah, it's
Awesome.
frustrating because I'm now like, oh come on, I just want more people, but I'm also like, okay, don't waste this now as I've made some good new understandings. Don't waste those people on old learnings, right? So
Exactly. No, that's good. That's a good call.
oh,
Cool.
and also quite fun.
It's
My
looking really good.
thank you. So my wife has just gone through my get text file and translated everything. So we've got a first pass of Japanese in there as well, which will be, I haven't merged it in yet, but it's quite exciting to have like, oh, we've got like the whole UI in Japanese now. So which is interesting because I've got
Nice.
so it'll be fun. So I've got talked about the startup hub in Fukuoka that I'm a member of. So obviously because of COVID, I haven't been as active there as I would like to be. But one thing they do is we have like a 6 monthly like meeting with them. So I've got a meeting next week with people from FGN, the actual, it is a co-working space, but it's more than that. There's this like startup that they're trying to, support and grow startups in the city rather than just being like, yeah, you can have a desk. So I've got a meeting next week with people from FGN and also apparently people from the city. And I'm like, ooh, okay. I don't know what or who, but they kind of want to, know how it's going, just talk about like what I need. So they're like, what can we do to help grow the company? So having a working Japanese version will be kind of cool to be able to go, look, you please use it.
That's awesome.
So yeah, they're always looking at ways to let to try and get the city or companies within their kind of network to support startups and to help. So if there's something that they can say, all right, like we know a team within our department or in a company that will help you test this in Japan. So I'm hoping that I can get something from that. So it's, I said that they seem very proactive in trying to get things, trying to get startups working and better. So that's been fun. And what other fun things have I had? So here's an interesting one as well. I haven't published it yet, but we've got the how you're feeling aspect. You got the emoji mood check-in, right? I had somebody request one for being sick, and I'm like, oh, that's so obvious. Like, especially in this, especially in these times, right? So I've added the little sick guy emoji with his thermometer and
Nice.
it's kind of one of those you're like, oh yeah, I never thought of that. But it's like you might not be, you're still working and checking in, but I'm feeling a bit under the weather. I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually quite cool. That I'm not sad and I'm not happy, but I'm just feeling a bit off. So I've added this. My intention is to make that completely flexible and have that customizable either by the user or by the workspace manager. But for now, I want to try and keep it concise to just like 5 or 6. So I've added that via a request. So that's fun.
I see that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Did I actually publish that?
The little guy with the
thermometer.
It's the guy with the emoji with the thermometer, right?
That's it.
Yeah. It's here.
Cool.
I see it. That's cool.
Oh yeah, I did publish that. Cool. So that actually the project thing also helps with the how you have this organization, your teams following teams. Again, that kind of makes that something I can play with a lot more, because this idea of like which projects you're on, I can bring projects a little bit more in focus as to how you use the app. So it's funny how just a word change, I actually did toy with the idea of actually just renaming teams, and I'm like, no, it actually deserves more than that. I think there's more I can do with it. Once you've changed the wording for something in your mind, it almost changes how I think of that feature. Even though it's all very similar intentions, the change of wording actually made me realize things I could be doing with it that I haven't really thought about. So it's crazy how important copy is, right? And just like naming things is.
Yeah.
It almost like frames something in your mind that it closes. I may have even mentioned this before, but just by calling it one thing, you almost like build up barriers that it can't be something else. And I think by just renaming those things, workspace and projects, it reframes them different, and they take on a different life or a new life, because they're less closeted or less like closed in as to what that feature is. So it's actually quite exciting. It's like, this actually gives me a whole new set of ideas, and the trick now is not doing those but just starting down that path, trying to scope those changes to the fact that, okay, right now you've got projects, just add that, move teams, change workspace, and then okay, that step is done. Don't try to then get onto this whole, well, I can't release until exactly. So but at least it then frames in other people's mind that there are other possibilities. I think by having teams, people assumed it has a limit, right? Oh, because teams are this and that's it. Whereas I think by having projects, it suggests that the feature will be taken further, right? Because there's possibilities with interaction with other tools. Well, you might have, you might want to import your projects from your PM tool or things like that. So it's really hammered home just how important getting this naming stuff is. So but I feel I'm on the right path anyway.
I think so. And you're right. Naming things is really difficult, but it's difficult, I think, because of the ramifications of naming something. And like you said, it kind of puts you in a mindset, and it frames what that thing is, and it boxes you in, right? So it's pretty critical. Naming things is.
Yeah, you've got shows, sessions, recordings, and after you figured it out, it seems obvious, right? It's like, well, of course it's a this or that, right? But getting there is not as easy as it sounds.
And oh man, I've changed it so many times. I don't know, I don't even remember how many times I changed the structure, the organization of things within FusionCast, because I thought of one way and then it didn't work very well, and And then at some point I had sessions all mixed into one place, and I didn't have the concept of scheduled sessions and unscheduled sessions, which then later I renamed to anytime sessions.
Right.
So many faces.
But again, that idea of like an
many things that I
unscheduled session
renamed.
versus an anytime session is actually like, again, it changes how I even think about what that might be used for, right? If I have like an anytime session, well, I'm just dropping it on a call, it makes sense. And unscheduled, it's like, was I supposed to schedule it? It almost suggests that I'm doing something wrong by doing that. It's like, well, it's unscheduled. Maybe it should be scheduled, but I'm doing it wrong, right? So it's really difficult.
I'm happy to hear you're going down this path of renaming certain things and reorganizing things. I think that's going to make the product more intuitive and position it better and make it easier for the user, for sure. Just to understand what the tool does,
Yeah, I mean, my goal is to minimize the amount of additional explanation I need to do. I mean, I envision I'm going to have some amount of, on-screen, prompts and copy and things. But the hope is that, what people understand when they see a particular page or phrase, that they'll understand through the context of the name and what's presented on the page, rather than me having to have explainers and, pointers and question marks all over the place. I'd rather not do that. So
yeah cool. Well, anything else you want to share? That's it.
That's it for this week.
Cool.
It's been a busy one, but it feels like progress. Yeah, it does feel like things are constantly improving. So that's good. It's a long journey. It's not an overnight. It's not an overnight project, is it? Either of these.
It is not. Making software is not easy. I saw a tweet by Ian Landsman. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's been around for a while. He's started his SaaS 20 years ago or however long it is, a long time ago. His company builds help desk software.
Okay. Yeah.
I think Userscape is the name of the company. I can't remember now, but he's big in the Laravel community. He was actually one of the people who discovered Laravel in the early stages, and he hired Taylor Otwell, who's the creator of Laravel. And so he's pretty well known in the community. He posted something on Twitter that said something like, programmer's credo: we do these things not because they're easy, but because we thought they were going to be easy.
That's exactly right.
I thought it was pretty funny. Yeah,
exactly. I know, you think, it's how difficult can it be? Famous last words, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it fun, though, is knowing that if it's easy, you probably wouldn't want to do it in the first place, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I feel about FusionCast. If I had known it was going to be so challenging, I probably wouldn't have started. So it's a good thing that I didn't think about that and didn't know that, because otherwise I wouldn't have started it. Yeah,
Excellent.
Just got to keep going forward.
Absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. All right, Alan, this is probably a good time to wrap it up. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Catch you next time. Cheers, man.